Hello, beautiful sisters, beautiful family. Today is day 2 of 10 days of pleasure. So for today, I am going to use a conversation yesterday that I had that was super inspiring me to talk about pleasure. So yesterday I was in a workshop in the Jade temple all on women's pelvic anatomy and physiology, and it's always just so amazing to be in these group spaces with other women and female-bodied people, because the conversations that just very naturally get moving and flowing, they just like have this air of inspiration and of connection and really of like homecoming, of like we're supposed to be interacting with each other like this. We're supposed to be learning from each other. We're supposed to be sharing the stuff that normally we don't really have a space to share in our culture, our society, our friend groups, our families. And it just feels so, so yummy, so delicious, so nurturing, so pleasurable, really. So anyways, I was in this workshop, I was participating, and we actually had a lot of amazing conversations because, as I said, this workshop was all on anatomy and physiology of the female pelvis, and the work that I do like naturally started to come in kind of in some of the conversations. I teach a lot more on the energetics and the emotional side of connecting with the female body and with the yoni and with our sexuality, and definitely the physical stuff as well. But for those of you who have been with me, you know I'm really big on like creating like this foundation of a connection, of an emotional, even spiritual, very deep and personal connection with the yoni. To me, this is really the foundation of the work that I do. Anyway, so a woman comes up to me afterwards and she was like, "Hillary, how do I have an orgasm?" And I'm like, oh yes, I love these conversations. So the answers that I gave to her, and of course there are many, I want to share in this video today. So the first thing I said is you want to start a jade egg practice, a consistent jade egg practice. Why? Because on a physical level, this is going to connect you on an emotional level also deeply with your vagina and with your yoni. And it's going to tone and strengthen the muscles in your vagina and in your pelvic floor, which brings blood flow, which then brings sensation, which then makes you feel more, which just, it's almost like you go from, this is what I experience and a lot of women say to me, you go from, there's my cat in the background again. You go from just kind of like walking around, like not really being so aware that you even have a vagina, to like, oh my God, like my vagina and my yoni, my whole pelvis, my pelvic floor, my sexual organs, they exist. They're an important part of me, you know? So working with the jade egg to tone and strengthen the muscles in a woman's pelvic floor and her deep core, this is one incredible way to either become orgasmic or to enhance your orgasmic experiences. So for anybody who is wanting that, who is wanting more pleasure, more orgasmic pleasure, I highly, highly recommend the yoni egg. And I'm going to be making a separate video sometime in these 10 days of pleasure to specifically talk about the jade egg and pleasure. But that was my number one answer to her. The second answer was to know your pleasure anatomy. So when I say pleasure anatomy, it's different from the actual anatomy, which is like where the uterus is and the ovaries are, the different bones, the ligaments, all of this stuff. Pleasure anatomy, there's two parts of it. One is knowing and exploring and cultivating the pleasure spots within your yoni. So that's like the G-spot, the A-spot, the cervix, this P-spot, and just generally becoming more aware of the entire yoni. I'm also going to make another video on this later in these 10 days because I want to share about yoni mapping and yoni de-armoring, so I'll talk a lot more about that then. But the other really, really important thing to know about pleasure anatomy in a woman's body is about erectile tissue. So this is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. I think that I've talked about it in this group before. Just like a person with a male body has erectile tissue in the penis, people with female bodies also have erectile tissue. Ours is just on the inside of our bodies. So erectile tissue is any tissue in the body that can swell and engorge with blood. And when that happens, we get that like hot, horny, turned on feeling. So in a female body, there's like a whole network and like different layers of erectile tissue. And generally speaking, going from the outer layer to the innermost layer really, really enhances pleasure, which then of course in turn makes orgasm more likely. So what are these layers? The first layer is called the vestibular bulbs, sometimes also called the clitoral bulbs. And I just happen to have this beautiful model of the clitoris here. Yes, this is the whole clitoris. I'm going to talk about it more. So these are the bulbs. And this is about where the entrance to your vagina is. So these bulbs, they're like tear-shaped like pieces of tissue. They're underneath the skin. And they can really be accessed on both sides of the vaginal opening. So I really like to locate them, to take my fingers like this. So you can see this is the shaft and the glands of the clitoris coming out. So you can take your fingers like this, just over your clothes right now if you want to. And just about underneath these fingers, they'll be around the entrance to the vagina. These are where your bulbs are. You want to get super, super friendly with these. This is the first layer of erectile tissue. So spend a lot of time breathing into the bulbs. Spend a lot of time massaging all around there. Spend some time squeezing, pulsing around these bulbs. Because again, this is the first layer of erectile tissue. So it's the part of the yoni that, again, generally speaking, can become engorged and aroused the easiest and the quickest. And then when you go in layers, then the other parts of the erectile network tend to be able to become engorged more easily if the previous layer has already been stimulated, if you get what I'm saying. So the second layer is the clitoris. And the clitoris is not just the little shaft, like this is what, all of this is on the inside of the body. This is pretty much what's on the outside of the body. This is kind of a long shaft here. But the clitoris is more than just what you see on the outside of the body. On the outside of the body, there's the shaft, and then there's the head or the glands of the clitoris. These are also, see here, these are called the legs of the clitoris. So these can be accessed by massaging underneath the outer lips and even in between the outer and inner lips. And I really find that massaging the bulbs first and then massaging the lips so that these legs can get nice and warmed up, and then moving to the shaft of the clitoris, this is a really, really great way to go. Of course, every body is different, and part of the point of me sharing all of this is so that you can go to your own body and experiment and touch yourself and learn what feels good and what doesn't. So the third and the fourth layers of female erectile tissue are a little more interchangeable. They are called the perennial sponge and the G-spot. So the perennial sponge is located inside of the vagina. If you were to bring a finger in like this and press back towards the anus and the rectum, that's where the spongy layer of erectile tissue is. It can also be accessed in some bodies through massaging the perineum. For me, I definitely get a lot of stimulation when I massage the perineum, and I can really, really feel the engorgement that happens. And then the last fourth layer of tissue, or the third and fourth, like I said, they're kind of a little more interchangeable, is the G-spot, or the goddess spot as sometimes it's being called now, or the sacred spot. So the G-spot is actually much, much more than just a spot. It's more like a cylinder, kind of like tube, and it surrounds the urethra to protect the urethra. Point is that the G-spot it's not just like this, but it's more like this. And the way to find the G-spot is to put a finger inside of the vagina, and then you want to kind of like curl upwards as if you're trying to almost like massage the front wall of your belly, of your abdomen. And the G-spot tends to have like a ribbed texture, similar to if you were to take your tongue and put it on the roof of your mouth and just kind of, you can feel there's like some ribbing there. So that's how you know that you're on the G-spot. So again, the reason why I'm telling you all of this is because a lot of people don't know, men and women and non-binary folks, we are just not taught about female erectile tissue. It blows my freaking mind, people. Like, this is so basic. You know, I wasn't even taught this in my entire year-long program for sex coaching that I was in. I learned it through that program through a book that I read, but still, it's really important information to know, especially if you're trying to or you're wanting to open yourself to orgasm or expand your orgasmic capacity. So yeah, yesterday I had this beautiful conversation with this woman about female erectile tissue and how she experiments with touching these different parts of herself, going from the first layer up to the fourth, that this will support her orgasmic journey. So the last thing that I said to her is something that I'm going to repeat from yesterday because it's so freaking important. And this is taking the time and space to touch yourself, to explore your body, but without a goal. So actually taking the goal of orgasm away. Ironically, for a lot of people, this was my case also. I used to be not very orgasmic at all. Now I'm highly, highly orgasmic. But part of my journey was taking orgasm out of the equation, just putting it off to the side and touching my body and exploring my body just for the sake of touching it. I know it sounds ironic, but this can really facilitate the journey that gets you there. And I know that you've heard it before, but it's really about the journey. It's not about the destination, especially when talking about sexuality. That being said, I think it's an amazing thing to have intentions and to have goals and to have things that you want to experience, and then to learn the practices, get the tips and the tools and the education and the support around you to direct you on the path to getting there. But it's not a linear path. It's more like this. Okay, so taking away the goal, which is at the end of this so-called linear path, and just walking down this beautiful path because it's delightful and it's pleasurable, and you open so much and you connect and you heal and you grow and you have realizations. It's a really, really beautiful thing to do. Okay, so there's actually a lot more that I could share on how to have an orgasm, but these were the things that came up yesterday that I thought, I'm just going to share this for 10 days of pleasure today. So I'm going to give you some optional homework, and then I'm going to guide us in a short pleasure break practice. So the optional homework has to do with locating the first layer, so the bulbs of erectile tissue. So what you could do is create a nice space in your bedroom or in a place that feels nice and safe and comfortable to you. Get a mirror, and you guessed it, you're going to take that mirror and pop it down so that you can see your vulva, you can see the external yoni, and just have a look around the vaginal opening, especially on both sides. You can even experiment with placing 2 fingers there and then breathing very deeply into the bulbs, and you might be able to feel the bulbs actually expanding with your breath and even filling up with blood a little bit. It might even feel pleasurable. So it's really amazing to look at them when you're not engorged at all, and then to start to massage yourself, start to turn yourself on a little bit, and then look at them again in the mirror when you're at like a level 5 of turn on. And you'll likely be able to see some engorgement and like a deepening of the color. And then again, look at yourself in the mirror when you're at like a level 8 or 9 of turn on, and you will likely notice, wow, there's like some big time engorgement here. So that's a really fun practice to do. Also, it's just amazing to look at your yoni in the mirror and to start to get familiar with her in that capacity. It's incredibly healing, incredibly beautiful for someone with a yoni to go through that process, especially because we've been taught so much bullshit about how we should and shouldn't look on the outside of us. and starting to just actually look at it with your eyes as if you're looking at a flower or a tree in nature. No judgment. Everything is perfect and beautiful as it is. It can be really restorative. So yeah, that's your optional homework for the night. And now, let's move into a pleasure break. So for the pleasure break today, I want to guide you through just a couple, probably a 5-minute practice or so that I call the pleasure pulse. And basically what this practice is doing is it's isolating some of the different muscle groups in the vulva and in the yoni, and it's having you pulse. So a pulse is like this. So it's kind of like a squeeze and a release, but I prefer the word pulse because a squeeze can have an association with tightness, and we definitely don't ever want any tightness in the yoni. We want strength and tone, but totally not tightness. So the pleasure pulse is about pulsing around different muscle groups, and there's so many muscle groups in the yoni. You might not feel the difference at first, but I totally, like 99% guarantee that if you do this practice consistently, you'll start to notice a difference, which is very, very cool. Another reason why this practice is super beneficial is because it trains your focus, your awareness, the sensate focus. We talked about this yesterday, because you're having to bring your awareness to different parts of your sexual anatomy. So for this practice, you can do it sitting or you can do it lying, and I'll give you the option to just visualize these different parts, or you can actually take your finger and touch the different parts on the outside of your clothes, on the outside of your underwear, or touching directly against your body if you prefer. Okay, so you can close your eyes if you'd like to. If not, it's fine to leave them open. And just holding a hand, cupping the outside of your yoni right now. Taking a few breaths in. And just beginning to direct your breath down into your yoni. One more deep breath in. You can add a little smile to your face like we did yesterday with that inner smile. And then either bringing your awareness to your clitoris, to the shaft of your clitoris, or you can bring a finger and just rest it there. Just beginning to pulse the muscles around the clitoris. So you're squeezing and releasing them. Imagining that you're pulsing energy and blood flow and juiciness, aliveness, pleasure, that you're literally using your muscles to pump all of this down into your clitoris. And then releasing, and you can bring your finger over your urethra, which is just beneath the clitoris, in between the clitoris and the vaginal opening. It's where you pee out of. And then beginning to squeeze and release around the urethral opening. And releasing here. Now moving your fingers, 2 of your fingers, so they're just on either side of the entrance to your vagina, just over those bulbs. Pulsing here. Really laser focusing your attention on the bulbs as well. And releasing. And then placing one finger gently over the entrance to your vagina. Pulsing around the entrance. And releasing. And bringing one finger over your perineum, in between the vaginal opening and the anus. And here you can actually apply a little bit of pressure if that feels good for you with your finger, if the finger is there, and then squeezing and releasing. This is a really great place for grounding. And then releasing. And bringing one finger, if you feel to, just lightly over your anus. And squeezing and releasing here. Pulsing the anus. And releasing. And then just cupping your vulva now with one hand or both hands. And we're just going to take a moment to be with the yoni. So just dropping your attention into her, into it. Noticing if you can relax the yoni, the pelvic floor. Soften the muscles. And just taking a moment to notice the sensations that are there or that aren't there. You can even speak a few of them out loud like we did yesterday if you want to. And then smiling to your yoni and taking a deep breath in. And you can open your eyes. Okay, beauties, thank you so much for joining us here today on day 2 of the 10-day pleasure challenge. I'm so curious how this was for you. So if you feel to, it'd be amazing to read your comments, let me know what you experienced, to let some of the other women see what came up for you. And I will be back here with you tomorrow. Sending you so much love.